You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynne Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Friday the 16th of August 2013. Wolsey misleads House of Lords on Palestinian deaths. Justine Greening, £1 billion worth of Nigerian aid is money well spent. UK wage decline amongst worst in Europe. Breast implant suicide bomb threat. Union paymasters provide 77% of Labour's party's funding. Norway protects seasick crabs. In politics and on the streets, the French far-right surges. Nick Griffin, MEP, on meeting German nationalists and the family weekend. California Governor Brown signs transgender student bill. Manure-filled hot tub leads to Quebec's man's arrest. Thought for the day, will we ever know the truth? And finally, going out for the evening. UK news. Wolsey misleads House of Lords on Palestinian deaths. Senior Minister of State for the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, Baroness Sayeeda Wolsey, stands accused of misleading the House of Lords and the public following the incorrect citation of the number of Palestinians killed by Israelis since January 2012. We have made no assessment of the number of non-violent protesters killed or injured in the occupied Palestinian territories since 2002. According to the website of the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, 3,643 Palestinian civilians have been killed by Israelis since the 1st of January 2012, in incidents directly related to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. But the figures are astronomically incorrect, as the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs states clearly in its report from June 2013 that the actual figure of Palestinians killed by Israelis in 2012 was just 262. World at 8 states, "Why do we give Muslims any power in our country at all?" springs to mind. They cannot be trusted at all. Justine Greening, £1 billion Nigerian aid money is money well spent. Britain giving millions of pounds to Nigeria while it embarks on a space programme is a sensible investment, the government insisted today. The oil-rich country, which has accepted £300 million from Britain in aid this year alone, has set in train ambitious plans to launch its own rockets and even put a man into space. But International Development Secretary Justine Greening was backed by Downing Street after arguing that it was money well spent by Nigeria. However, a Department for International Development spokesman was keen to stress to Mail Online that Britain is not providing any aid funds to Nigeria's space programme. World at 8. Duh! Who are they employing at the Department for International Development? If we give them money to do anything, then that money is funding their space programme, a corrupt government and even the Islamic rebels. UK wage decline amongst worst in Europe. Wages in the UK have seen one of the largest falls in the European Union during the economic downturn, according to official figures. Figures from the House of Commons Library show average hourly wages have fallen 5.5% since mid-2010, adjusted for inflation, which is the fourth worst decline in the 27-nation bloc. By contrast, German hourly wages rose by 2.7% over the same period. World at 8 comments, well, small and large businesses in the UK wanted cheap foreign labour and they've got it. The trouble is, it is not economically viable to dumb down wages on the home front because it rebounds. Breast implant suicide bomb threat. Heathrow on high alert over credible intelligence. Security has been beefed up after intelligence states Al-Qaeda is plotting attacks on airlines flying out of London. Heathrow Airport is on high terror alert amidst fears women suicide bombers are ready to strike with explosives concealed in breast implants. One staff member said, "There are genuine fears over this. We have been told to pay particular attention to females who may have concealed hidden explosives in their breasts. This is particularly difficult for us to pick up, but we are on a very high state of alert." It's led to long queues here at Heathrow, much longer than usual at this time of year. But because it's a summer holiday season, no one has complained. Al-Qaeda's chief bomber maker Ibrahim al-Asiri is understood to have developed the method of foiling airport scanners by concealing explosives in an implant or bodily cavity. World Today comments, I would have thought there was no need for this, as with a burqa you could hide anything under there, and how would the jihadists feel with their women being searched around their chests? Of course it could be that Islamic plastic surgeons could implant it when they do breast augmentation on Western women, which is a sobering thought, if not an explosive one. Union paymasters provide 77% of Labour's party funding. Ed Miliband's growing dependence on Labour's union paymasters was laid bare yesterday as it was revealed that the Barons are providing 77% of the party's funding. Figures released by the Electoral Commission watchdog revealed that the Unite Union, led by far-left firebrand Len McCluskey, was again Labour's biggest donor, contributing £772,195 between April and June. In total, the unions gave Labour more than £2.4 million in the second quarter, out of a total of just over £3 million, which included lump sums of £485,830 from the GMB and £458,080 from Unison. European news. Norway protects seasick crabs. Norway's Food Standards Authority has banned a fisherman from displaying live crabs because they might get seasick. I don't believe it. In politics and on the streets, the French far-right surges. Christian Science Monitor reports, feeding on anti-immigrant sentiment and economic dissatisfaction, the French far-right has been enjoying a new visibility. Such efforts might impact only a tiny swathe of the French population, but they come at a key moment as intolerance reaches new modern highs, driven by an ascendant far-right movement. Just this Sunday, the government said that a young French soldier was arrested near Lyon for planning to attack a local mosque. He held views close to those of the radical extreme right, having already attacked a mosque in Bordeaux last year, France's Interior Ministry said. World at 8 states. The Christian Science Monitor should be reporting for Islam going on that wording. The Front National is enjoying a surge in popularity due to the amount of foreigners not only in France but making themselves unpopular due to doing what our foreigners do. Protest and take. No country should turn the other cheek, and nationalism is only another word for protecting one's own cultural identity. We should be more like the French. I now hand you over to Nick Griffin MEP for his talk today on meeting fellow nationalists in Germany and his briefing to the ADP on working in the EU, to the family weekend and our culture of heritage.
By the time you listen to this, I'll be in Germany meeting with German nationalists. This isn't, of course, official EU business. Good heavens above, nationalists aren't allowed to meet under the EU. But it's something I believe in very strongly, the idea that nationalists from all over Europe need to cooperate, we need to exchange ideas, we need to exchange help. The NPD, our German friends, there's been a change in the law in the German state whereby they're probably guaranteed to get one, quite possibly two, MEPs elected in next year's European elections, and naturally they're keen to know more about how the system works and what they can and can't do. So I'm off there to brief them about that, and I hope it goes well, but obviously I'll let you know how it goes. Well, I'll be back in the country by Tuesday night, which leaves me 3-4 days to take part in the final preparations for the joint British National Party and Alliance of European National Movements Family Weekend, which is being held in Shropshire over the August Bank Holiday weekend. I really do hope that some of you will be able to come. We've got all sorts of things lined up now. You may have seen some of the adverts before, but we've now had confirmed a bush tucker challenge. Apparently various people, I fear I might be one, but I shall try to dodge it, will be forced to eat all sorts of disgusting things blindfolded, while all the rest of you sit and titter and laugh and enjoy the discomfort. And so I'll try and dodge that whenever I can. I'm certainly too old for the self-defence for teenagers, but we've got a very, very good tutor in on that, giving youngsters ideas about how to stay safe out on those mean streets. We're hoping to have, quite separate from that, but perhaps related, an exhibition by a couple of seriously good boxers, and they'll also be there. One of them's a coach. He'll also be there available again, also to the youngsters, to give them just a little bit of a taster of the noble art. So that should be quite good fun to watch, and I think a really good thing. There'll be some serious politics. We've got a discussion scheduled on nationalism in Europe, practical idealism in practice, looking at ways perhaps some of the things being done, again, for instance, in Greece, in terms of food parcel aid for poor Greeks. To what extent can that be adapted to the United Kingdom, to us in Britain? I very much hope it can be, but we'll be discussing it there. There'll be some people who've already tried it, hopefully there to discuss it as well, and we'll see what comes from that. We're making a real effort. It's not just a personal hobby horse of mine, I have to admit that it is. We're making a real effort to push folk music as something which should be at the very heart of British National Party events, things such as this, things such as the conference, things such as regional activities. The English in particular, we're a people who collectively have forgotten how to sing. If you look at records or even old, very early footage of life in Britain not that many decades ago, everybody was singing. People sang as they went to work, kids sang on their way to school, people sang in the evening around a piano in the house or so on. These are the days before television. It was a nation alive with song, and it was part of our identity. And that's been effectively completely lost. Now, I'm not a defeatist. I always look on the bright side, and I think that karaoke, paradoxically, has perhaps begun to reverse that. If you go back 20, 30 years, nobody sung. It was only left to the professionals, and thereby all the rest of us were shut out on it. Karaoke, although ostensibly a Japanese import, has brought back, in a lot of places and for a lot of people, the tradition of having a go, even if you're not actually very good. It's deprofessionalised singing, which I think is a really good thing, because it means that instead of being spectators, everyone can take part. So to push that forward, we got on the Saturday night a social evening which we've titled All Stand Together, and I'll be asking you and all those present to join me in a folk song session. We picked out some brilliant songs with some great tunes and great choruses. Well-known ones like Wild Rover, Black Velvet Band, Leaving of Liverpool. Several of our own. The Menace, you may remember, was written about the situation in Oldham some years ago. It's still a damn good song. If you don't know it, come along and learn it. All Stand Together. It's hugely popular when it was sung just impromptu at the early summer event we held a couple of months ago. So let's have another crack at that. And then I've dug out some other songs, much less well known, some of them, but with some absolutely great choruses. Yarmouth Town, Blood Red Roses, Spanish Ladies, The Widow and the Devil, Drink Old England Dry. If you've heard them before, you'll know the great songs. If you haven't heard them, you think, what on earth is he talking about? Well, come along and find out, because I think it's going to be fun. So that's the family weekend over the August bank holiday. That's the 24th and 25th of this month. It's in a most beautiful venue in Shropshire. We'll have, among other things, canoes for the youngsters, and we've got 7 or 8 of those lined up now, it seems. So whether you can come with a family or just come along by yourself, you're all very, very welcome. We're not looking for a huge turnout. We want people who will come along and be entertained and make entertainment and join in the spirit of the thing, and in particular those 2 Saturday and Sunday evenings, sing with nationalists, with people just like you, sing songs of our kind, of our culture, of our heritage. Come along, give it a go, you never know. You might like it. I hope to see you then. If not, I'll tell you all about it in a future edition of this radio show. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Nick, and we look forward to your report next week. World News. California Governor Brown signs transgender student bill. California Governor Jerry Brown signed a controversial bill into law Monday afternoon, allowing the state's transgender public school students to choose which bathrooms they use and whether they participate in boy or girl sports. The law would cover the state's 6.2 million elementary and high school kids in public schools. Manure-filled hot tub leads to Quebec man's arrest. A man from Quebec's Lanaudière region is facing charges after he allegedly filled his estranged wife's hot tub with manure after being served with divorce papers. On Tuesday morning, Quebec provincial police were called to a house in the small town of Saint-Amélie-d'Alger, located about an hour and a half north of Montreal, after receiving a mischief complaint. On site, the officer saw a man with a tractor placing manure in a spa or the hot tub of his ex-wife at the front door, said Sûreté de Quebec Sergeant Audrey Anne Bilidou. The man allegedly refused to stop when ordered by the police and then tried to take off on the tractor. Police soon caught up with him. He was arrested within minutes, Bilidou said. One police officer was injured, but from what I heard it was only minor injuries. According to the local newspaper Journal de Joaillier, the suspect is a retired police officer and had just received notice that his estranged wife had started divorce proceedings. The newspaper also reported that the accused had to be subdued with pepper spray. World at 8 says, well, you could call it a load of shite, couldn't you? Thought for the day: will we ever know the truth about immigration until it's too late? Now, I know that I and the British National Party bang on about immigration, and that is the one point that both acts for and against us, both in elections and gaining or losing members and activists. Now, at this present time, there is not one person in the UK who doesn't, at one time or another, voice an opinion about immigration, from the educated, fairly liberal person to the man in the street, who is quite obviously more affected by the problems that massive immigration brings into his country. Now, personally, within the party, we don't hate immigrants, but we do hate the system that has been in place for many, many years, which allows huge amounts of unchecked and unknown peoples into this small country, and also provides, at great cost to the British people, funds for many, if not all, of these immigrants to obtain homes, furnishings, food, luxuries like mobile phones and cars, free compulsory education and free health care, all of which they have never contributed to and very likely never will. Where else in the world would they get this treatment? The USA and Europe, whilst giving a small amount, don't come anywhere near the British and their bonne-armée, while the non-immigration countries that most of our Arab, Indian and Asians come from give out nil to their own indigenous peoples, let alone foreigners, who for the most part have to pay heftily if they want to stay in those countries. What is it with the Brits? I spoke on Monday about the Hegelian dialectic, and we are seeing it more and more. The papers are putting the potential problems of uncapped or continuing immigration on view, amongst which was an article titled "The Seriousness of the Crisis." Nearly 70% of all school children in Greater London are non-white, according to figures published by the UK's Department for Education, the DfE. The figures, which can be found on the DfE's website, show clearly the level of ethnic cleansing that's taking place in Britain's capital city. According to the figures, there are 498,445 pupils in total in London, which is divided into Inner London and Outer London for administrative purposes. Inner London has a total of 176,920 pupils, of whom 81.3% of primary pupils are officially classified as non-white British by the DfE. For secondary schools in Inner London, the DfE says that 80.7% are non-white British. The suburb of Newham has 92.4% non-white British level at primary school level, and the borough with the lowest number of non-whites in primary schools is Hammersmith and Fulham, and there they constitute 73.7% of the total. At secondary school level in Inner London, the picture is much the same. Some 80.7% of pupils in secondary schools in Inner London are non-white British, with 90% of pupils in Newham being the most, and Hammersmith and Fulham being the fewest, with 69.7%. Outer London has a slightly larger number of white British pupils, the direct result of white flight from Inner London. Even there, however, the prodigious reproduction and immigration rate from the Third World has ensured that white British kids are in a minority. In Outer London, some 62.1% of primary school children are non-white British, and 58.7% of secondary school children are non-white British. These figures mean that in total for all of Greater London, some 67.25% of all school pupils are non-white British. For all of England, as opposed to all of Britain, The number of non-white British pupils in primary schools is 27.1% and in secondary schools some 23.4%. These figures mean that, given current immigration and third world reproduction rates, non-whites will be the majority of the population in Britain aged 21 and under by the year 2030. After that, it'll be less than another 2 generations and Britain will be almost entirely non-white. This is no made-up fantasy, it's a very real danger to the very existence of Britain, and because this scenario is also playing itself out in all of Western Europe, the USA, Canada, Australia and New Zealand, the very existence of Western civilization is at stake. Anyone of European heritage who is aware of this danger and who does nothing to help stop it is partaking in the genocide of their own people. This was published by Venutios Brigantes on August 1st, 2013. The new study by Operation Black Vote, which found that Britain's ethnic minority voters may determine the 2015 election, thus makes a point which all of us should have grasped already, though the detail is compelling. In its account of the study today, The Guardian reports that the number of seats where black and Asian voters could decide the outcome had rocketed by 70% compared with the 2010 election, and says that the ethnic minority vote is bigger than the majority of the sitting MPs in no fewer than 168 constituencies. The seats extend beyond inner city areas to include such places as Southampton, Oxford, Sherwood, Ipswich and Northampton, according to the paper. One can quibble about the detail, but the trend is unmistakable. In 2001, 1 in 10 voters were ethnic minority members. By 2050, that figure will be 1 in 5. And this presenter would bring that year forward by 30 years. Remember the figures you are allowed to see. Now, of course, I don't want to sound like an Aryan nation or a white supremacist, but we have to admit that the majority of Indigenous Brits are white or varying degrees of. We mustn't be ashamed of it, especially nowadays when it's clearly not cool to be white and proud, whereas any other colour is promoted throughout the media. Now, the facts about the school children are chilling. Why? Because these are the voters of tomorrow, especially if repatriation for illegals and foreign criminals is not started, and a form of voluntary repatriation undertaken as well. Our borders need to be closed now, not in a few years' time, but now. We need to leave the EU soon, and in the meantime we need to abolish the Schengen and human rights laws that we adopted into our parliamentary system and send back a vast majority of the EU immigrants as well. Now, this obviates the racist question because many of the EU immigrants are white, apart from the Romas of course, and no country wants the Romas, even the Romas don't want the Romas. We are technically full, and we Brits know that all the fuss about building new homes doesn't apply to us. It applies to newcomers and their children, as do most of the benefits that were brought in after the last war for us Brits. We are like turkeys voting for Christmas, or ostriches with our heads in the sand. It isn't racist to want to keep your country mainly white European. That is how we started, and that is how we will end. Despite the multicultural dream and the efforts over the past 40 years to make us believe we are all descended from multicultural, ethnically diverse migrants. We aren't and we weren't. Fact. All the non-white children in schools will grow up. They will breed. They will take your homes. They will take your food. They will take your benefits and they will take your place in your country if nothing is done immediately. Not a few years' time, not after careful consideration of phony figures and staged media. Remember, your eyes don't lie. There are more and more immigrants on our streets, in our schools and running our country. I am far from a white supremacist, as I don't believe that whites are superior, but I do believe that everyone should have their own land, regardless of colour, and that we whites should have our country back. I don't care if these people are asylum seekers or have been tortured. I don't care if their country is down the pan. I don't care if they need money, food or homes for their families. I don't care if they want their kids to have an education. I don't care if they're ill or old. I don't care if we profited from slavery many years ago. I don't care if they blow each other up in their own hometowns. I don't care if they can't be bothered to dig wells. I don't care if their sodding boats collapse. I don't care at all, and I don't care for the so-called brotherhood of man. I really, really don't care. And finally, ready to go out? I thought a good finish this week would be This American Funny. We were both dressed and ready to go out for a dinner and theatre evening. We turned on a nightlight, turned the answering machine on, covered our pet budgie and put the cat in the backyard. We phoned the local taxi company and requested a taxi. The taxi arrived and we opened the front door to leave the house. As we walked out of the door, the cat we'd put out in the yard scooted back into the house. We didn't want the cat shut in the house because she always tries to get at the budgie. My wife walked out to the taxi while I went back inside to get the cat. The cat ran upstairs with me in hot pursuit. Waiting in the cab, my wife didn't want the driver to know that the house will be empty for the night. So she explained to the taxi driver that I'd be out soon. He's just going upstairs to say goodbye to my mother. A few minutes later I got into the cab. Sorry I took so long, I said as we drove away. That stupid creature was hiding under the bed. I had to poke her rump with a coat hanger to get her to come out. She tried to take off, so I grabbed her by the neck. Then I had to wrap her in a blanket to keep her from scratching me, but it worked. I hauled her fat rump downstairs and threw her out into the backyard. She'd better not poop in the vegetable garden again. The silence in the taxi was deafening. You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynne Mozart, and I and the team at World at 8 and Radio Britain wish you all a very happy and safe weekend. Please remember to send your conference motions into your regional organiser for Adam Walker by the 21st of August. They should be governmental based, that is national motions for possible new laws, and also try to attend the family event on the 24th and 25th of August. Good night. 12 was just 262. World at 8 states, why do we give Muslims any power in our country at all springs to mind. They cannot be trusted at all. Justine Greening, £1 billion Nigerian aid money is money well spent. Britain giving millions of pounds to Nigeria while it embarks on a space programme is a sensible investment, the government insisted today. The oil-rich country, which has accepted £300 million from Britain in aid this year alone,
You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynne Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Friday the 16th of August 2013. Wolsey misleads House of Lords on Palestinian deaths. Justine Greening, $1 billion. Thought for the day, will we ever know the truth? And finally, going out for the evening. UK news. Wolsey misleads House of Lords on Palestinian deaths. Senior Minister of State for the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, Baroness Sayeeda Wolsey, stands accused of misleading the House of Lords and the public following the incorrect citation of the number of Palestinians killed by Israelis since January 2012. We have made no assessment of the number of non-violent protesters killed or injured in the occupied Palestinian territories since 2000. £1 billion of the Nigerian aid is money well spent. UK wage decline amongst worst in Europe. Breast implant suicide bomb threat. Union paymasters provide 77% of Labour's party's funding. Norway protects seasick crabs. In politics and on the streets, the French far-right surges. Nick Griffin, MEP, on meeting German nationalists and the family weekend. California Governor Brown signs transgender student bill. Manure-filled hot tub leads to Quebec's man's arrest. 2. According to the website of the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, 3,643 Palestinian civilians have been killed by Israelis since the 1st of January 2012, in incidents directly related to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. But the figures are astronomically incorrect, as the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs states clearly in its report from June 2013 that the actual figure of Palestinians killed by Israelis in 2000